my latest vlog, and today I'm going to be talking about making part of the World Book Day costume that I'm making for one of my sons this year. And I'm going to do a few showing you various things I'm making, because one vlog showing it all would be way too long. So I need to apologise for being sniffly and croaky because I have a cold, which is marvellous. It's exactly what you need in school holidays when you've got lots of things you want to get done, but there you go, I have a cold. So we're going to talk about this waistcoat. So Bertie, my oldest son, wants to be Newt Scamander from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I mentioned that in the last vlog, and I'll show you an inspiration picture of his costume, but basically it's really complicated. He wears a waistcoat, he wears a shirt, which we're going to buy, he wears a waistcoat, which made here, he wears a suit underneath, and he wears a blue kind of frock coat over the top. Not many things to make there then. So I'm making the waistcoat, which is here, and the blue frock coat. He's not going to bother with the suit jacket as well because he would be so hot. He just wouldn't keep the costume on, so it's pointless. And he's just going to wear his school trousers because they're a reasonably good colour and shape and style. So the two items I'm making in terms of sewing are the waistcoat and the coat, and those are the two vlogs I'll show you. So this is about the waistcoat. I'll show you the various processes. I'll try to move through it quite fast because to be honest, there's been loads. So first of all, I've based the waistcoat pattern on a Burda pattern, which I had already. I'll put down below which Burda pattern it is because I can't remember off the top of my head. It's from one of the magazines, which means you have to trace it off. So what I'm going to be showing you now is me tracing off the pattern. Turned out that the actual pattern in the magazine was only sized up to about age 5, and Bertie is 10. He's small, but he's not 10, nearly 10. He's 9, nearly 10. He's small, but he's definitely not 5 years old anymore in terms of clothes size, so I had to size it up. So basically I just decided to add 1 centimetre around all the seams, or no, 1.5 centimetres around all the seams when I traced it, in addition to the seam allowance that you have to add on Burda patterns. I thought I'd show you very briefly the layers that I've got when I trace a Burda pattern. So on the very bottom there's a spot and cross paper that you'll see. Next layer up is some yellow tracing paper, almost like carbon paper that Burda sell. And then on top of that is your Burda pattern sheet, and then you need a tracing wheel, which is one of those spiky wheels. I'll show you mine. There you are. Sorry, quite dark there, but that's a tracing wheel. And I have one which, if you're going to trace any patterns that don't have seam allowance, this little baby will save your life, because it has several holes in it. It's made by Clover, several holes in it, and you can have one hole that runs on the seam line, and you can have one wheel, so one wheel that runs on the seam line and one wheel that runs 1.5 centimetres out, if that is your seam allowance. And then you get the pattern traced off perfectly, rather than trying to have to hand draft the seam allowance in, which is just painful. You can use one of these, costs about a £5, 5 English pounds, maybe even less, and it solves all of that for you, so it's a really great gadget. So you will have seen a video of me tracing that off. However, the pattern that I used didn't have some of the basic and most important features for the costume. So if you have a look at the inspiration picture again, you'll see that the waistcoat, it has a collar, which I thought was pretty important for how the costume looks. It has lots of buttons, which I also thought was quite key, and it needs a pocket. Now the pocket is perhaps the most important thing, because if you've seen the film or read the book, you will know that he has a little sort of stick insect creature who stays in his pocket quite often, and we're going to make a little stick insect creature out of wire, and so we needed a pocket in the waistcoat and in the frock coat. We needed a pocket, so I had to add in a collar and I had to add in a pocket. So I'm going to show you briefly how I added in a collar. On the toile, I basically just looked at the pattern and then added a curved section to the front waistcoat. and then you can see a video now of me fitting that pattern to Bertie. So I've cut this out in some, it was actually blackout lining fabric because it was quite stiff and in my stash and not going to be used for anything else. So I made it out of some waste fabric, fitting it on Bertie, but mainly I was looking to see if how I drafted the collar worked. So I decided that also I needed to raise the neckline. So originally the neckline came down kind of to the middle of your sternum, almost bust point, where the V opened, and it needed to be much higher for the costume. So I decided to raise that, having seen the twirl. And then I also quite liked the size and the shape of the collar. So the next part of the process was that I needed to go and work out how to make a back collar, because I'd only added it to the front, and how to make an underside to the collar, because I could have just left it as a raw edge. It's only a costume, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And I puzzled for a little while, and I thought, and I was a bit stuck, to be honest. And then I thought, hang on a minute, I've got a whole cupboard full of, well, a section of my cupboard full of patterns. Surely one of those has got a collar on it. Let's go and have a look at how it was made. And sure enough, as you can see, I found a pattern that had a collar on it. It's a women's jacket pattern that has a single collar, and that's what I needed. I didn't need a notch collar or a double-breasted or anything. I needed a single collar. So I thought, yeah, that's the style. So then I went into the pattern instructions and had a look. What are the shape of the pattern pieces that make that up? So I'm showing you those now. And then I literally looked at the tissue and looked at the curve, and how they've done it is the front piece of the jacket basically is a normal shape with extra added on for the curve of the collar, but then an extension at the top, which you'll see on the video. So I thought, right, that's how I do it on my waistcoat. So then I went to my waistcoat pattern piece, stuck it down onto some more spot and dot paper, had a measure of that curve off the women's pattern, and sort of proportionally how much they'd added onto the extension to make the back collar, added that on, and then I needed to draft a facing. So I basically just traced exactly the same shape, but made as the front waistcoat pattern piece, but then made it much shallower, so that could become a facing. So I did all of that and I cut it out. So I've made it out of the proper fabric. You'll see that on the videos next. And then I fit it on Bertie, and you'll see him modelling the brown version with the collar. And at that point I noticed that the side seams were way too big, so I'd sized it up too much. He's a very slender child still, so I decided that I needed to take the side seams in again. And then once I was happy with the final fit of the actual version, I needed to draft a lining, because the easiest way is actually easier, in my opinion, to make a lining to a waistcoat than it is to try and finish all the various edges with hems or binding or whatever you're going to do. Because if you do a lining, well, you sew it inside out and then turn it the right way around, and that finishes all of your edges. So I drafted a lining, which is the same pattern as the waistcoat, but the front piece of the lining is the waistcoat front minus the facing, and then you add in a little bit more seam allowance. To insert the lining, the best way of doing it is to actually unpick the side seams and then sew the lining right sides together to every single edge except for the side seam edges, and then you can bag it out, reverse it out, and then you sew the side seams from the inside, and you turn the waistcoat the right side out and you stitch in the ditch of the seam, the side seam. So you stitch in this seam, and I've got some video of that. Hello, Felix. And then the final piece of video, hello, is of Bertie showing you him wearing his marvellously finished waistcoat. So you'll see that I got 7 matching buttons.
Yeah, it's me!
There he is.
Hello!
I nearly recorded it all without being interrupted, it's a miracle. So I put 7 buttons on there and you will see Bertie modelling his final waistcoat. So we'll be back very soon showing Felix's Yoda costume. No, don't say bye yet. Come back here. We will be back very soon. The next step of the way is Felix's Yoda costume, and then the final step of the way is Bertie's Newt Scamander coat. Thank you for watching, and bye!
Bye!